make while irrigating the lands. I now request the speaker to begin. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Um, Let me know from you all, what do you think? Because all of you are working in the field of agriculture. What do you think are the mistakes that farmers are doing in irrigating their land? Before I come to saying what is our understanding and what is our solution, which will form the presentation that I made. So can I have some idea of what you think is really the reason why are farmers at all over irrigating, and why, and what are the mistakes that they are doing?
Sir, the participants, they won't be able to speak, but they will be post. They can post their replies or the questions, and then we can continue. But anyhow, you can proceed.
Okay,
Maybe once they post their comments, I will read out to you.
right. Thank you. Okay, it is very clear that farmers over irrigate. That is because groundwater is basically private property. Canal water is public property. So when it comes to private property, the farmers will extract all that they can do, right? And when it comes to public property, all that they can take, they will take. That's why you find that tailenders don't get the water. All the water goes elsewhere. Also, the technologies that we have developed over the last 50, 60 years have also led to this problem. For example, the heavy application of chemicals, which would require a lot of water. That is one reason. Second, the deterioration in our soil health, which means the ability to hold moisture for a longer time doesn't exist. And third, farmers think that many of the diseases can be avoided by over irrigation. Actually, diseases are caused by irrigation, is what we find. Now, what is it that why we need to improve the irrigation efficiency based on the mistakes that we see as happening on the ground? 17% of the world's population is in India. We have only 4% of water, and we use 84% of the water that is available. India is the world's largest user of groundwater and double that of China. I'm saying all this because I wanted to understand that why the water crisis has got created. If we study our irrigation water utilization efficiency, it is 36 to 38%, whereas globally, it is anywhere from 76 to 80%. So that means there is a scope for tripling the water efficiency that we have. And what is it, how is it that we go about doing that would be the presentation that I'll make. We all know that water is very central to successful farming. Otherwise, we have to do only rain-fed farming. If we want to get better crop, higher yield, variety of crops, etc., then we have to think in terms of improving the water efficiency, because water is availability is shrinking. Groundwater is even more important because in the canal water, mostly it is monocrop and only seasonal. So therefore you find only summer, you find crops like rice, wheat, etc. grown. But if you look at India's demand and if you look at increasing farmers' income, then you have to go into high value crops such as horticulture, forestry, perennials, etc. Now, all of these would require water in summer. So therefore, it is that water is not made available by canals, mostly. It is available by groundwater. And this groundwater is shrinking dramatically in India, right? So therefore, to increase farmers' income, to be able to cater to the growing middle class demand for food of the kind of food that they're interested in, this is basically vegetable, fruits, etc. We need to think of how groundwater should be used very, very efficient. Also remember, summer is the time when groundwater is the lowest, while summer is also the time when the demand for water is highest, partly because of summer and partly because of the plant requirement. And that is aggravated by the rising heat waves. So therefore, we find that the water use, groundwater share is 62% of irrigated farming. So we need to be very cautious about the use of groundwater, because canal water is something else. Groundwater is required to deliver, as I told you, horticulture crops. 68% of India is drought prone, and a third is chronically drought prone, right? So therefore, we are finding that drought proneness has increased. More and more districts are coming under water, what is called as a dark zone, which means no further water is available to be tapped from the groundwater. So we are heading towards a very drastic situation, and therefore we need to be very cautious to avoid the mistakes we are doing, or even the thinking that we are doing of how irrigation should be done. Groundwater withdrawal has increased tenfold between 1980 and 2015. That means the extraction that we are doing of groundwater has dramatically increased, and it is clear that this is not sustainable at all. So we have no other option but to think of the most efficient and effective use of available water if you want our farmers to do well. We are also finding that because of moisture stress, there is a low crop yield and high mortality. See, the crop yield is a function of how much optimum water the plant gets in the summer period. But if there's a moisture stress, which is because of the practices that we adopt or the techniques that we adopt, that leads to low crop yield. Low crop yield means lower income. But that is not the only problem. If you see, there is a very high mortality of fully grown peak yield age fruit trees. Remember, a tree like mango, etc., take about 5 to 6 years before they start to really give you what is called as the yield, as the potential yield. But by that time, the groundwater table has come down and the moisture stress has increased, and therefore these trees dry and die. If they're dry, the yield comes down, and if they are dead, they have to be cut down. If they are cut down, this is a big asset loss to farmers. I have seen this personally in many districts in Andhra Pradesh, of how millions of fruit trees, right, have to be cut down, or farmers would incur a huge amount of expenditure trying to save them by irrigating through tanker water. But even that data tells us does not work in perennial crops. So therefore, we have to think of another way in which we can address moisture stress amidst reducing availability of water, and see that valuable farmer assets such as fully grown trees do not die. That is something which is very important. Next. So what are the challenges we address? First, India is a tropical country. There is already talk that El Nino is going to revisit us this year. Before year, we had a very good rate, in fact, the highest since 1901 in peninsular India. But this year, we are going to face the El Nino effect. Already we are seeing that the heat wave is rising in many parts of India. The temperatures are soaring. This also would mean that the gap between night temperature and day temperature is also shrinking, which is also another matter for worry. So it's not only during the day that the temperature is high, but it's also during the night when the temperature is abnormally high. That is a tropical country, and therefore we have to be very guarded, unlike Europe, etc., which are Mediterranean, which are much more temperate in that. As I told you earlier, we are seeing rising water shortage. groundwater shortage especially, even surface water. If you now read the latest data from the water mission, you find that all the tanks all over India have got 20 to 30% less water compared to what they had last year. Right? So therefore, we are already water stressed, moisture stressed, and and this is accentuated by prolonged heat waves, because the heat waves are not just sporadic, but they are now prolonged. They are there to stay for long enough. So therefore, the transpiration is much higher. The demand is also much higher. How do we get out of that whole challenge that we face, arising partly due to climate change and partly because our own overexploitation of water resources and the most inefficient use of available scarce water? As I told you earlier, moisture stress would lead to low productivity and therefore poor farmers' income. We find this also, I told you earlier. I'm just reiterating that mortality of fruit trees drying and dying is a huge asset loss to farmers. In I think somewhere around 1907, 2007, a high-level commission was adopted appointed by the Prime Minister of India to study farmer suicides in Hyderabad. And the biggest cause for it is because of the number of trees that were drying and dying. So that's the scenario we face, not now, but almost 15, 16 years back. And actually the situation is worsening. Now, amidst all this, what we have as a technology or the state of the art of irrigation is called the drip systems. All of us believe drip is the most efficient way of irrigating. But if you really look at what farmers practice are, farmers generally remove off the drippers. They rather let the water flow. So the drip laterals which come at a subsidy, drip lines which come at a subsidy, is actually used to cut down on the labor required for flood irrigation, but not the quantum of water that is required to be applied. So therefore, drip has that problem. And so therefore, the consequences and caveats of drip is to be understood before we think of a new regime. Let me tell you one thing, that if we understand what happened in Punjab and Haryana, we ushered in the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution has basically a very high quality, genetically improved rice and wheat varieties, Norman Borlaug and Swaminathan. It was accompanied with irrigation being made available. So therefore, irrigation was plentiful, was made available. And then it was backed by petrochemicals. To increase the yield, it required petrochemicals. Now what happened, as time went by, the response of petrochemicals to the water, to the yield was coming down. So farmers increased the application of petrochemicals 3-fold to 10-fold. As they increased this, because the thirst of water is very high in the use of petrochemicals. As you know, once you put urea, you have to apply water immediately. Therefore, you found that this led to over-application of water. Already they were over-applying. Now they were over-applying for the chemicals. And that has led not only to over-application of water, but all the residue going down the entire drainage system, leading to all our water bodies becoming extremely polluted. A study in Andhra about 3.5 decades ago showed that a lot of problems that women had is because of the kind of water that they're having. So we are not only using excess water, but we are also polluting water bodies and groundwater. I think that is the way our irrigation abuse must be ended. But then beyond drip irrigation, in the last decade is what is called as precision irrigation. Precision farming now provides a plastic mulch. Basically, it is trying to say that since the evaporation loss is very high in drought, let's cover it with a plastic mulch. And we don't understand what will be the consequence of this application of plastic mulch. It would mean that the soil will be dead sooner or later, because there will be no aeration, there will be no water seepage, nothing like that would happen. And therefore the soils would be dead. All that soils will do, instead of growing as the crop, will serve as anchor, which means we have to increase the petrochemicals, etc., for the yield. So I think that's where we are heading, and this would mean even more requirement of water. This also is leading to another problem, which is hard pan in the soil, poor water infiltration, and low aeration. Do remember that this mix between soil and water, the nexus must be clearly understood. So actually precision irrigation is solving one problem but creating another one. For example, when I travel in Karnataka, I find, or even in Andhra or Telangana, I find plastic mulch being used on vegetable crops like tomato, etc. After 3 or 4 months, they are taken out, right? And when they are taken out, lots of it is left either in the field, etc. So we have plastic piles and piles of plastic we are doing. In Haryana, in Himachal, for example, you'll find the same plastic mulch, but of a much higher micron. So I think the way we are advancing our science is solving one problem, but creating another and a bigger problem, which we cannot reverse. The other thing is that now I find that a lot of microbe inoculums are coming in. These are basically industrially bred and applied, right? We have to understand that microorganisms, fungi, bacteria, etc., have to be native, they have to be local. Now, we did this invasive species in plants, and there we could at least cut it or remove it from the root or burn the root. But once invasive microorganisms enter into our soil, we can do nothing. It is an irreversible damage that we are doing. Everybody thinks hybrid vermicompost is very good. Vermicompost, yes, certainly has some value, but it does only move horizontally, whereas native earthworms do it vertically. So I think we need to understand this, and therefore the microorganisms that we are introducing into the soil, right, has to be very, very carefully done. As much as possible, it has to be local, and I'll tell you how we do it as we go along. At the same time, please remember, today consumers want good quality food. So therefore, how do we go in for good healthy food, right? So the challenges are raising farmers' income, sustainable agriculture, efficient water use, and the unknowns of climate change, such as El Nino, heat waves, drought, etc. Next. So I told you about this. I've been involved in rural development since last 45 years almost, and this is what I found. And this motivated us to think of water efficient irrigation, which is called the system of water for agriculture rejuvenation, which is a co-created with farmers and scientists, and I'll tell you more about it as we go along. So I listed the problems, the abuse we are doing, the multiple problems it is creating, and what needs to be done, which is our innovation, and that's what we'll talk next. See, on-campus trials of drip shows that it is very efficient in water saving. There's no doubt about it. But in farmer practice, everywhere they apply 60%, minimum 60% more water compared to scientists' recommendation, right? And when I tell scientists, why is this gap? They say NGOs go and educate them. You can't, because why does it happen? The farmer is not confident of moisture adequacy where it matters. So therefore, he will over irrigate. And if he has the water, he will use all of it or even more. So farmers adopt drip to eliminate labor cost. It is subsidized, and therefore reduction of water is just a false claim of drip. as we see it in practice. It's good in the lab or in the ICR, but not really on the ground. More importantly, we must understand what is drip logic. It is field capacity to wilting point. Field capacity is essentially very much required because of the application of chemical fertilizers. At the same time, this destroys the biological living organisms in the ecosystem of the soil. This leads to higher soil thirst, which require more water, as I told you, or moisture stress. So that's the kind of vicious cycle in which drip has led to us. But we still believe that that is the state of the art. It's the best water efficient technology. I think it is suited for chemicals. It does not save water, and we need to think of another way of improving our farmers' income and water efficiency. I told you about the application of 30 to 100 micron plastic mulch that covers the drip laterals and the emitters. This is to be frequently replaced, etc. And therefore, this is creating a worse problem. The idea is to stop evaporation. To stop evaporation, we are getting into a bigger problem, is what I think. Under plastic mulch, microorganisms cannot survive. They leave there. So there's a double whammy on water irrigation, over irrigation, along with fertilizer application. And then plastic mulch would mean that our soils will have no role to play in productivity, whereas that is central. And unless we have healthy soils, we cannot produce healthy food. And today consumers want healthy food. Okay, next. What is the system of water for agriculture rejuvenation? It's basically a moisture diffuser that is embedded at the plant root zone. In drip, water falls on the surface, drop by drop, etc. Actually, you find this, because it drops at one place, there's a heavy salt that occurs. Whereas what you require is no longer application of water, but measurement as moisture. In other words, what we do is, we no longer talk of the quantum of water that a plant requires based on its growth and soil, but on the intensity of moisture it requires in different periods. So we have a moisture diffuser which is buried at the root zone. A special dripper is connected to the drip lateral because most farmers with perennial crops have drips system in water scarce, groundwater scarce areas. So we are piggybacking on that to reduce the cost and make it easier for farmers to use. Water is sent via a microtube into a uniquely designed box which contains granular cut size squats to slowly release water with widest moisture spread. Please remember the problem with subsurface root zone irrigation. Today drip has subsurface, but it is only subsurface, whereas SWAR is root zone. We use design software and field testing to define the ideal size, shape, height, maximum spread of the moisture, etc., of the diffuser that is buried at the root zone. The numbers vary according to the nature of the species that we have, and I'll explain to you a little later. Root zone moisture data is collected using a portable, you can see it here, so that the farmer, as I told you, he must be confident that there is enough moisture at the root zone. Because he doesn't know that, he over irrigates. Now we can measure the moisture, and based on that, he can do it. This can also be further sophisticated, but it will cost you more, wherein you can have embedded sensors which give you the data into your cell phone itself, including remotely switching on and switching off your pump systems. But I think that is not, India is a country of small and marginal farmers whose well-being is very important to us. And therefore, we are not promoting those high expensive sensors, but we are promoting the portable one so that the farmer knows and is confident to plan his irrigation schedule, whether it requires every 3 days or 4 days or once in 6 days. There are two things that the farmer does. He reduces the quantum of water he's applying, and more importantly, instead of water being applied every alternate day, can reschedule it to third day or fourth day. based on the moisture data that he gets. Along with this, we also provide, because our soils are extremely depleted in microorganisms, we develop a locally prepared, this is the one, the second one, which is local. As I told you, it has to be native. It cannot be alien. So we try to create an ecosystem wherein we take the existing microorganisms and make it flourish. Also, we found, our research shows that measured moisture and microbes is the ideal way to efficient use of water and high crop productivity. Next. So what is our SWOT done? Why do we want to change? First, deliver moisture at the root zone. This will automatically save you water by minimum 50%. Next, measured irrigation will minimize water application, because a plant life cycle requires varying amounts of moisture. So we developed that based on studying the Kc values, so that we provide adequate moisture. All right. So we save water, and then we also minimize and thus optimize water application. Microbe inoculates help in the efficient plant use of soil moisture and for soil health, because it is the microbes which are playing, or living organisms that are playing a key role. So that becomes very important. If there is considerable carbon in the soil and humus, then there will be much more, there will be zero moisture stress. And even if you don't irrigate for a day or two, nothing will happen. None of our peak yield age fruit trees need to die. They can be made to survive by rationing the water and having a healthy soil. Then they can go on. We also know that for effective water use, we must go for mycorrhizate, which is also an inoculum that we prepare along with what we do for the microbes, because the mycorrhizate helps in root growth and absorption, and helps in a much better yield coming in from the plant. And remember, in horticulture, what is important is not just the yield, but the quality of the yield. If a pomegranate or a mango is nice, big, and looks good, people will pay more money. So therefore, we need to think that when it comes to all our crops, the quality has to be, whereas scientists have been hung up only on yield. It has to be yield and quality, and the measure is how much value does the farmer get, how much net savings can be increased. Finally, management is, because the decisions that farmers make is based on the moisture data that he gets from it. We are also now adding other equipment by which we can say what is the change in the carbon, etc., etc. But that's work in progress. Next. Now, this has been widely field validated. Krishi Vigyan Kendra studied it, and then they found 40% less water application of SWAT with 10% higher yield, early fruiting, low on weeds because there's no moisture, water on the top, more biomass and higher root to shoot ratio. More biomass and higher root to shoot ratio will further help improving the soil because they go back into the soil. We have also got 10 agencies, well-known ones. Recently, the Dr. M.S. Swaminathan Foundation is also doing that in Dindigul. I was there last week. SWAR plus our microbe inoculum. It shows 40 to 60% less water use. That is less water compared to scientist recommendation. I'm not talking compared to farmer application words, scientist recommendation. Because all these sites we compared with scientist recommendation and our practice of SWAR. 10% higher yield, and as I told you, improve crop quality, 20% less nutrient application. Because a lot of solubles can certainly be delivered directly at the root zone. So much less is required, cost will come down, and the efficacy is much higher. And the polluting that I was talking about earlier drastically will come down. It also uses less electricity, 30% less electricity. We also found that this is excellent to lower the solar HP of the solar pumps. Instead of 1.5 HP is good enough, is what we found. Because there is no water on the roof, on the top, we find that labor cost of weeding is brought down, or even application of weedicides are not required. What also we found is by diffusing the moisture, it works even with saline water, of course, within a certain range. And most importantly, as I told you about, it can ration water. The only technology to ration and keep moist the root zone to end high fruit tree mortality that we were talking about. Next. Okay, this is the visit of people, so I don't have to tell you what it is, etc. This gives you a lead. Income. Next. Okay. Apart from validating it on the ground, we won the Global Champion Innovation Award for highest water efficiency at the Paris International Exposition in 2015. We also in 2016 won $100,000 innovation prize from securing water from food from Washington. But that was our old technology. We were working on SWAR, but then we abandoned those things and we moved into a different way in which the moisture diffuser works. So even the earlier iteration won 2 awards. It was also listed by Niti Aayog. Then last year we received the FICCI Water Award for 2022. ICAR Pusa Krishi has given a prize of 5 lakhs, and for that, Act Capital has provided 50 lakhs to develop it as a business so that the impact can be much higher. We not only provide SWAR, which we sell, but we also provide an advisory how to make the inoculum, and therefore the combination of the 5 M's, which I talked about earlier, is the way we have to improve our region. This has been published in Shifting Grounds, a transition to sustain. This is published by the IRMA. Down to Earth has an annual State of Environment report. 2023 one carries SWAR also in it. Next. This is a testimony I got from the University of Iowa in USA. University of Iowa, I'm naming, apart from what the farmers and customers are saying to us, is considered the Mecca of Western agriculture. They studied our living compost, or the microbe inoculum that we make. They said, we find the product is 100% organic and does not use any chemicals or petroleum products to enhance its effectiveness. The raw materials that go into its making is farm-based with locally available materials and farm animals. The availability of nutrients in the product reach plants via microbial process, which converts fiber and other carbon compounds, which are utilized by mycorrhizae and rhizobium to enhance the absorption of organically bound plant nutrients in the product. We found this product very effective in farm trials and field testing conducted in tropical conditions in India, and we are working with them on a long-term series of experiments to further improve, to customize, and to study the mechanisms of nutrient conversion and assimilation in the plant root zone. And I think this becomes very valuable, not only for soil health and for water reduction, but also the challenges that climate change brings up. And we expect the results will be available in the next 3 to 4 years. That's what we do. Next. Next.
To change it again, some photos are there.
Yeah, so you can see this. This is just to give you a picture, right? On the left is drip, on the right is SWAT. This is in Maharashtra. After a month, the left one had 100% water as recommended by scientists. The right one had SWAT with 50% less application. Within a month, you can see the change. The next one is a tribal woman who grows her own vegetables, etc. and this is how it is done. You put one lateral, from there you take it to the sides and deliver it. So therefore, you can bring down the cost also. This is a rooftop that we have done in Hyderabad. So basically, what I think is that the days of excess water application must end. Right? It is not only wasteful, but it is also bad. And emerging challenges require us to be effectively using the concept of moisture instead of water delivered at the root zone, healthy soil. So by providing these 5 M's, what we are doing is to lay the foundation for ecological, healthy, water saving, water efficient, water effective soil health foundation in agriculture, and it is the farmers who will build the mezzanine. It can be organic, it can be natural, it can be permaculture, it can even be commercial farming. We have no problem. But it is important that factor endowments of water, soil, root, living organisms are kept, because that is required for it has to be passed on to the next generation for the well-being of mankind. Thank you. I've done this, and you can now go ahead with any questions that you have.
Thank you, sir, for the very detailed and interesting presentation. Now, let me check if any questions are there. Okay. So, first question is, what is swar irrigation? In simple terms, if you can explain.
Okay. Basically,
in which all states of India is this is being used?
Okay, which states? Okay, yeah. See, swar basically changes the method of irrigation. How does it change it? It provides water where it is required. That's the first important change. It is required at the root zone. We are a tropical country. Heat waves are rising. There is no point in putting water, even in drip, on the surface. Or even subsurface doesn't help, because it has to be at the root zone. The next important, so therefore we do that. The thing is that we deliver at the root zone the water, but we deliver it in the form of a moisture, because moisture is what is required. If you put it too much of water, then, as I told you, it will become field capacity, and that is harmful for the biologicals in the soil, right? So therefore, we then see that the moisture is diffused and spread to as much as possible. If we can cover 2/3 of the root area with moisture, we have done the job. That's what all the science tell us. How many do we put per unit for a vegetable crop? We do 1, and we prefer perennials there. In the case of fruit trees, which don't require too much of water, it's such a pomegranate, it will be 2 units on both sides of the plant. But in the case of high water absorbing crops like coconut, etc., 4 is what we do. With MSSRF, we are now doing it on jasmine. We have done it in other tree crops, but we are now diversifying into perennials in vegetables as well as such as creepers, etc., because that's where the requirement is there. And Tamil Nadu is a water scarce area, at least this year, unlike Andhra, which had a larger. Which states have we done it? We have done it in Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Orissa, Andhra, Telangana, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Pondicherry, right? Please remember, we are an NGO. We are not allowed to sell. We cannot do sales. We do only limited. So till now, we have been only in the business of trying to understand how it works in different places, how it should be improved upon. So I think the R&D part is over now. Even on the micro inoculum that I told you, that R&D part is also over now. There's a lot of data that tells us how effective, efficient it is. So I think that is where we are now. We are gearing up this year to identify root zone of select species, which are now being taken up in an extensive way. For example, palm oil, dragon fruit, etc. And we are trying to work on that. We are also trying to see how it works with sugarcane, and therefore increase its application. We cannot do it for paddy, wheat, etc., etc., but that's something we can think of over a period of time. The key point is that we are the only people, our technology of SWAR delivers measured moisture at the root zone, that is, saves the water and efficiently improves the soil health, which has to work conjunctively with the plant. So I think that's the ecological system that we are bringing to bear, and that is very much the major shift or transformation that SWAR aims to bring or has succeeded to bring.
Okay. So what is the feedback about SWAR by the farmers?
Well, we have done it with about 400 farmers, right? The feedback has been very positive. There have been some issues. The issue has been that of if they want to plow, what is to be done? There is an issue of that. Okay. But generally, farmers are very happy. The only thing is, farmers want to use it, but they want us to give it at subsidy because they're very much used to subsidy. We cannot afford to do that. We cannot do that at all. So it's good. And now we are giving more importance to our microorganisms, inoculum, because that is something which is going to give us much better results. Optimum results will come only from that. Optimum productivity, quality of the fruit, and the income. So therefore, the whole ecosystem is what we are trying to sell to farmers, and they're doing it. But I must say, about 10% of our farmers have done the micro inoculum. Many did not do it, but now they are learning the value and they do it. Richer farmers who are not our customers are keen to do it, they will do it. For example, this year we have done it in a gated community in Hyderabad. They are very much happy. Yes, they're doing it like that. And recently, I think the Niti Aayog member Ramesh Chand said that why don't we use the farmyard manure that is available with goshalas and enrich it. I think that's what we will work on. But as I told you, we are a limited NGO, we are a small NGO, and the idea is to let you people know. We will be happy to provide the assistance, but it's for others to pick it up. But this is what I would say.
Okay. And next question is, according to you, what are the major problems faced by farmers in aviation?
Well, I think the major
You got the question, sir?
Yeah, major farmers, what problem they face is in certain places, groundwater is depleted dramatically. When they started their orchard, it was one. Later on, it became something else. So you find that many farmers have lost up, and that is on the rise. The second is labor. Farmers have a huge problem with labor. Labor has become scarce. Labor has become costly, and even if it's costly, it's not easily available or on time. The third is of electricity. Certain times the electricity is available, certain times it's not available. So I think these are the problems that farmers face. And the other problem is a lot of pest attacks, right? We find that SWAR system can help in tackling root diseases, but pests we still have no clue about it. And we have to see, because pest is a new growing thing. And therefore, we hope that we'll syndicate with others who can give a pakka advisory of what pest, what should be done. Because a lot of people say this will work, that will work, that will work. But in effect, it doesn't. It isn't proven to do so, right?
Okay. So, one second. So Mr. Mohan wants to know, in place like Ongole district, AP, where totally dry and sandy lands can be used, okay, can we use your concept and where no groundwater is there?
Look, if there is no groundwater, I cannot do anything. There must be groundwater. If the groundwater is a bit saline, no problem with it. In which case, we'll have to think of what species to grow also, right? Because there are certain species which are a little more resistant to saline water. So that has to be done. Yes, it does work. There's no doubt about it. In Ongole, very much so. Prakasham is a dry district. But without water being available, there's nothing. And water must be available in summer. That is the crucial test. Otherwise, you can only do seasonal crops. But if you want perennials, where the higher incomes come, right? We have to think of water being made available in summer. So people can share the water because we are bringing down. I am 100% sure that we can bring down the water requirement by 70 to 80%. We will exceed the global. And if this micro-inoculum is applied, the soil health improves, then we will find that moisture stress will be history, right? But this will take 2-3 years before the biologicals kick off in terms of the soil health and the ability to retain and deliver moisture, right? So I think it certainly can work in Ongole, Prakasham, etc.
Okay. Okay, so now we have the last question. Please tell us about your education and career background and what made you to take an interest in this topic.
Well, by education, firstly, I'm 72 years old. Okay, by education, I did my master's in business administration. I did my further education in specialization in international trade. My first job was with Shiv Nadar. Even before HCL, Hindustan Computers Limited was being set up. Shiv Nadar and we worked together in a company called Microcom that led to HCL being formed. In 1977, I left Delhi, came back to Hyderabad. I joined the Administrative Staff College in Hyderabad to be a member of the faculty teaching management. But then I thought I must do something for rural development. Therefore, in 1980, I went to Hyderabad. I set up development. I founded the Deccan Development Society. A lot of our work was on that. By 1990, I found that the direction that we were taking doesn't make sense. That development, we were becoming implementers rather than trying to unleash people's ideas, especially women's ideas. So I left India. My wife was also working in the Netherlands. So I went there and then from there to the US, etc. I came back, then I took over the Center for Environment Research. I did some publications on foreign funding to India. Then we worked on IPM, we worked on participatory forestry, etc. In 2004-5, I became active with the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act because in 1984, about 100 of us went by cycle from Hyderabad to Delhi, demanding the right to employment. So when NREJ came, I was very happy. I did a lot of contribution for the NREJ, not mostly. I was also a member of the Central Employment Guarantee Council. And we did from IT applications, everything we were, work time motion study, equal wages, all that we did. So in the beginning, for the first 7-8 years, I worked for the workers' welfare. Then I was invited by the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Bombay, to come and bring practice into theory. So I was with them for 3 years. And at that time, I said, NREJ is thinking of water conservation, I must work on water efficiency. So this water efficiency work started in 2011. I went there, and then 2015 we got some awards, but still I was not happy. The whole ecosystem started to fall in place. We could have been much ahead in this game, but COVID 2019, 2020 was in summer months. And in summer is very important for us because we couldn't get data and we could even travel to the villages. So I think now we are kicking back and we are doing it. So that's my background. Okay. Why I'm passionate, I think, yes, we need to transform the new challenges that are emerging. I think all of them get addressed because I'm improving, I'm scared. I'm saving a lot of water, I'm using it very efficiently. I'm improving the soil health, I'm producing better quality food, which is in demand. This could lead to increased incomes. And above all, we would be able to study this in the context of climate change. For instance, I am now trying to understand how can we control nitrous oxide emissions, right, in crops by the use of this approach to irrigation and fertigation. So let's see this all working. That's about my background. Thank you.
Okay, so that's very interesting and very motivating as well. So, okay, sir, I don't see any more questions from our participants. So now we have end of question round. On behalf of agricultureinformation.com, we'd like to thank you for a very detailed presentation and answering all the questions in depth. And we also like to thank all the participants for joining this meeting. The meeting will now be closed.
Thank you.
You're most welcome, sir. Thank you.